Hey, Nowicki, altrightnovelist.com. I wanted to continue my examination or a discussion, I don't think it's anything formal enough to call a lecture, on Hamlet as a sort of prototypical MGTOW character, although, of course, there was no such thing as MGTOW. Well, there probably was such a thing, but it didn't have that name in Shakespeare's time. Nevertheless, a character such as Hamlet is very interesting for the fact that he exhibits a lot of the characteristics that we see extolled by the MGTOW population, if you will, the MGTOW contingent, the sort of ideals that they discuss, rightly or wrongly. I'm not holding them up uncritically myself. You know, I am in sympathy with MGTOW in a lot of ways, as I've expressed, but I'm not a joiner, and I don't even know what it means to join something. It's sort of like being in the alt-right. You know, people talk about, well, are you leaving the alt-right? You're so down on certain things about the alt-right. You're very critical of the alt-right in certain ways. Are you going to leave the alt-right? And I always just sort of respond like, I mean, it's not like a club, you know? It's not like you have membership dues, and it's not like you can quit per se or get kicked out per se. There's nobody to do the kicking. I mean, people can proclaim themselves to be leaders in the alt-right and can speak castigatingly of somebody else, and I suppose pronounce him to be anathema or what have you. But there is no institution called the alt-right, and there is no hierarchy of the alt-right, although the alt-right often talks glowingly of hierarchies, of the notion of hierarchy. Same applies for MGTOW. Okay, I'm not a self-proclaimed MGTOW, but I am in sympathy with MGTOW, and you know, it doesn't really even matter that it's kind of a red herring to me whether or not you're a member or whether or not you are a MGTOW, you know, a self-proclaimed MGTOW or what have you. But in any case, that little tangent aside, let's get back to Hamlet. I discussed the last time a little bit about the opening monologue that Hamlet delivers, in which he is essentially very preoccupied with his mother and her betrayal, what he feels to be his mother's betrayal of his father's memory. And I recounted that opening dramatic monologue, that soliloquy that Hamlet delivers in Act 1, Scene 2. And I want to just come back to it for a second and highlight a couple things that I didn't get to that other time. And I want to draw attention to a couple of the metaphors that Hamlet uses, very arresting metaphors. Of course, he's Hamlet. He's a master of language. He's just, you know, an incredibly impressive character for all of his flaws. Again, I've talked about that many times, the sort of fascination of Hamlet as a character. So in this monologue, Hamlet talks about, if I get struck by lightning, then I won't send out this video, but if I survive, then I will record how close I came to getting struck by lightning, and it should be an exciting thing for everybody, but I think I'll be all right. We'll see. So, where was I before that thunderclap? So Hamlet is talking about his mother, and he uses these metaphors. He says a few things. He says, ere those shoes were old with which he followed my poor father's body, like Niobe, all tears, why even she, this is an interesting metaphor here, and it's a bitterly relevant one, especially as it pertains to shoes. We know about women and shoes, right? Well, so did Hamlet. Hamlet says, before, or ere those shoes were old, ere, E-R-E, meaning before her shoes, while she was still wearing the same pair of shoes, she remarried. I mean, how long do you wear shoes before they wear out and you need another pair? I don't know. If you're royalty, it would seem like you can, you probably trade in an old pair for a new pair, especially if you're a woman. Yeah, it wouldn't take that long, and yet, it was just a matter of a couple weeks later, she remarried. And he goes on to say, before the flushing of her galled eyes had subsided, before the tears had time to dry in her eyes, she married. Now, this is obviously an exaggeration or hyperbole, because the tears had dried a few weeks later when she did remarry. But Hamlet is speaking again hyperbolically, and there is a meaning behind it. And the meaning that he's drawing attention to is to say that those tears, she cried such copious tears at the funeral, but those tears essentially meant nothing, because just a short time later, she betrayed her husband's memory, and this was a husband who would do anything for her, who would not beteem the winds of heaven, visit her face too roughly. This is a man who would gallantly stand in the way of the wind to keep his wife protected. And this is how she responds to his death. She remarries his brother, who just does not compare. And Hamlet sees it. He says, this is like comparing Hyperion to a satyr. And later on, he says that his father that his uncle is no more like his father than he's like Hercules. And in saying that, Hamlet is, of course, drawing attention to his own self-appraisal, his own awareness of his shortcomings. But mainly through that metaphor, he's drawing attention to how his father and his uncle are not in the same ballpark. They just don't compare with one another. And yet, his mother, it boggles his mind so much that his mother could do this, and he's still reeling from it. And this is the thing that really gets him all wound up. It's not so much about his uncle. This is a point that I think needs to be made, because it's not dwelt on enough, even by scholars of Hamlet that I have read. I mean, the ones that I've read. Of course, there are many more that I haven't read. But it is my impression that nobody's really discussed this, but it's really important to draw attention to, because this is the speech in which Hamlet says, "Frailty, thy name is woman." And in the same speech, in the same opening monologue, Hamlet also says of his mother, "A beast that wants discourse of reason would have mourned longer." Let me repeat that. A beast that wants, meaning lacks, discourse of reason. A plain, dumb beast without a human soul would have mourned longer than his mother did. Now, is Hamlet speaking hyperbolically there? I don't know. There, it seems like he might be, unfortunately, speaking the truth about his mother. And because, I mean, if let's take a dog. a dog loyal to his master. If King Hamlet had a dog and then King Hamlet had died and the dog was left behind, the dog probably would have mourned longer than the wife did. And yet the wife put on such a show. Hamlet's mother put on such a show, followed his body to the funeral with such a display of tears. And again, this is what Hamlet simply can't get over. And it's what is the formation of Hamlet's entire perspective on women. What informs it to a great extent is how he feels about his mother, and how he feels about the betrayal that she showed. And I think it caught him by surprise. It was not something that he was expecting to have happen. I get the impression from the way the play is written, from the way that Hamlet's dialogue is written in this scene, from the things that he says in this opening soliloquy, the reader gets the clear impression that up to the time when King Hamlet died under mysterious circumstances, which the reader soon finds out it was no accident, it was a murder, but Hamlet doesn't know this yet when he delivers this monologue. But one gets the clear impression that up to this point, Hamlet had nothing but respect for his mother, and thought that she clearly loved her husband the same way her husband loved her, and would never betray his memory like this, would never put on such a hypocritical show of grief and then follow it up with remarrying such a short time afterwards, which indeed doesn't bode well, doesn't speak well concerning her fidelity towards him when he was alive. And it seems to me that, again, Hamlet's knocked for a loop by this, and he can't get over it. He is so infuriated with his mother. He eventually has it out with her in Act 3 and tells him exactly how he feels, and it's a pretty devastating scene. And she reacts to it. Her response is, you've turned my eyes within my soul and made me see myself in a way that I just can't bear it. And then even with that, Hamlet is relentless, and she says, no more, Hamlet, no more. And keeps at her, until the ghost appears again and tells him, hey, lay off, okay, you've made your point. This is in Act 3. So, in conclusion, it seems to me that Hamlet's attitude towards his mother, the Queen Gertrude, and her betrayal of his father is formative as far as Hamlet's entire perspective on women. And we will also see how this, later on I'll talk a little bit more about how I think this affects his relationship with Ophelia and his attitude towards her. I guess I've talked about this a little bit before. I talked about the dialogue between Hamlet and Ophelia a little bit in Act 3, Scene 1, but I want to get back to that subject later on. Okay, I hope you've heard me over the storm that's suddenly been emptied upon me here. I've spoken loudly, I think audibly, but maybe it's just made everything a little more dramatic about Hamlet finding out that his mother, whom he thought was a sunny day, is really a thunderstorm. That's a terrible metaphor. Okay, we'll end on that note. Andy Nowicki, altrightnovelist.com.